Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I do hope you find it well. My name is John, and I am an author, and welcome to my writing space. I'm coming to you here today on another Storytime Thursday. I did miss last week as I was out of town on a training. I had and just was a little too tired. I'll be perfectly honest to get a video recorded. 2 weeks ago, I did finish my first book, The Shadow of the Past. So that complete playlist is available. I'll link that at the end here. And also, before I dive into what I've got coming today, the usual reminders. I would love to hear your comments um, on this video, your thoughts, feedback, opinions, anything like that. It would also be awesome if you were to like, share, and subscribe this video. That would really help me out and me and my channel out. And certainly down below, link down below here, as well as the address we given at the end of the video. Please check out my website, johnholtgrefe.com, where I've got updates. The last 2 months, I've been doing sort of some daily writing. I started off doing some writing excerpts, but that's not excerpts, writing exercises. It's a little late my time, even my time zone here in Oregon. Yeah, writing exercises, writing prompts, but now I'm moving more into a fluid thing where a lot of the sort of my daily posting will have a paragraph two of an excerpt of writing. I might do a writing prompt. I might edit some of my older stories and like that. Where it's sort of going to be more of a daily journal of trying to get even a little bit of writing done every day. Um, Awesome if you check that out. Also linked below and will be posted at the end as well are my socials, as well as links to my books. It'd be amazing if anyone wants to check those out. So we are jumping in here today on my second book, And the Sun Burned Red. This had a little bit different of an evolution. I had the story of this in my head. I've probably had this in my head for a couple decades. I don't almost want to talk about that because it makes me feel old, but I've had it in my head for a while. But I started writing it in 2012. I took a break from editing my first book. Um, to jump in and for a not National Novel Writing Month in November, and wrote the first 10-15% of it before I ran out of steam, and then came back and tinkered with it a few times, but really finished it in around 2018 or 19. Did a bunch of editing, and then got that published in, was it 2020? 2021. I figured it out eventually. This is, as you can see, I don't know if you know, my first book back there in blue is a nice, nice thick. This book ended up being a lot more streamlined. In some ways, um, in some ways, I am. I don't want to say more pleased with it, but it's. I feel like a more mature story, or more just reflecting my maturation as a writer and as a person. Um, and really gets to some of the ideas and that I'm looking to communicate. So I really hope you enjoy. It'll just be reading. It'll be a fairly short excerpt today. I'll be reading the prologue, and I hope you enjoy. Like I said, I would love to hear your feedback and such. So, And the Sun Burned Red, prologue entitled Snowfall. Kaijon stirred in his bed. As far as he could tell, it was still some hours before dawn, and knowing that it was going to be a full day, he decided to rise. The fire had long gone cold, and his chambers were freezing, so he dressed in a woolen tunic and pants, both of a dark gray. Thinking further, he clasped a blue cloak about his neck, walked back to his bed, kissed his wife upon the forehead, and pulled furs up to cover her more thoroughly. He smiled to himself as he strode from the room. He was still not entirely used to the cold. It was a word entirely alien to him growing up in the city of Zyron. It was, however, a bracing way to wake up, especially once he got his limbs moving. Kaijon was a tall and powerfully built man, but the years were beginning to take their toll. Even warmly dressed, the foot-long scar on the left side of his chest, a souvenir from the Axeman who had nearly ended his life at the Battle of Gorin Ford, felt tight and stiff in the cold air, and the 3 flights of stairs down to the city square of Lechan made his right knee ache terribly. Although the sun had not yet creeped above the horizon, Lechan was already abuzz with activity. The city was ahead of schedule, and his architects told him that it would be completed in time for the trading season at the end of the coming winter. The final caravan had headed out the previous day, hoping to get over the pass which Lechan had been built at the foot of before the snows came. Kaijon spent a solid hour organizing with his servants the baggage train that would take him and his household south. At dawn, he broke his fast upon some fresh bread with a bit of warm stew. After that, he went and trained with his guardsmen. He remained as yet unbeaten in the practice yard, but it was only a matter of time before some talented kid, half his age, got the better of him. His entire body ached by the time he was done. He remembered a time which seemed to be getting even further distant, when he could fight all day without a single muscle's complaint. After that, there was a meeting with the architects to discuss what kind of fortifications he wished to guard the gate up to the mountain pass. Yet another argument with the delegation from Belthan about how many stonemasons the city had agreed to send. And then at noon, a meeting with the leading merchants who had agreed to set up shop in Lashan to take advantage of the increasing volume of trade with the peoples over the mountains. It was finally after assuaging the merchant's fears, again, of losing money on the venture that Kaijon was able to retire to his study and continue to update the chronicle. A servant brought in a plate of fruit for him to eat, and after calling for another servant to build the fire, Kaijon dipped his brush in the inkwell and began to write. Writing the chronicle had always been a difficult task for Kaijon, and as he often did before he opened the large leather-bound book, he, he stared at his mother Nerinah's flowing script on the front cover. Just as she had been the driving force behind his life's work of uniting the cities of the Baion Plains, the history of the changing of the world and that effort had been begun by Nerinah. She had felt that it was important for future generations to understand what she and Kaijon had done and why. Kaijon sighed. It had been 3 years, but his mother's passing had left him feeling directionless. After a moment, he shook his graying head, opened the book to where he had left off, and finally put his quill to the paper. He had produced several pages of his recollections on the Karen revolt when he heard giggling and shouting coming up the stairs to his study. As the shouting grew louder, the door of the study burst open and 3 children came running in. One was a boy of 10 years with raven hair just like his, dressed in woolen garments of dark blue with a deep brown belt and boots of the same color, his son Huan. Huan was leading a girl of 6 by the hand who was wearing a green dress and had a small fur draped around her shoulders that was the same color as her own auburn curls, his daughter Kaya. In close pursuit was a boy, Gaito, of 9, dressed in a tunic of bright red, with a thick yellow cloak proudly emblazoned with a 3-tiered tower in black of his father, Primarch Gades' city of Zyos. There seemed to be an argument occurring. "The world is not ending," shouted Huon as he darted around behind Kaijon's chair. "Oh, yes, it is," replied Gaito, confident in his knowledge as only a child can be. How else do you explain what we saw? I don't know, said Huon defensively. What makes you such an expert on it anyway? Guido puffed himself up as if he were making a speech. My father told me all about it before I came here. He said that it would slowly grow colder until we all die. And what is more, he says that it's all your father's fault. Recognizing that his son was about to respond with some insults that would likely lead to a fight, Kaijon rose quickly and interjected himself into the children's dispute. What exactly is the matter? It was Kaya still clinging to her brother's arm who responded quietly. We were in the courtyard playing, and this white stuff began falling from the sky. We tried to catch it, but it was too cold. Kaijan looked out the window and saw that a gentle flurry had begun, and thought for a moment about the caravan which had just departed, and hoped they would make it over the pass before it snowed in. As he turned back to the children who were staring at him expectantly, his wife Luana walked through the door out of breath. He smiled at her as he felt a pang of guilt that he did not have time to give her more help with the children, none of whom were hers. Kaya had taken well to her since her mother had died bringing her into the world, and thus never knew her. Huon, however, was old enough to remember his mother, and was getting towards a difficult age. Guido, a hostage of for his father's good behavior, had been nothing but trouble since joining his household 6 months previously. As Kaijon rose to get a chair from the corner of the room for Luana, he addressed the children. That white stuff is called snow. When it grows cold enough, the clouds get all heavy and fall to the ground in those little fluffy pieces. Once it only happened at the very peaks of the mountains, but now during this time of year, it is growing cold enough for it to fall here. This change has frightened some people, including your father, Gaito, who remember when snow is distant and unknown because they are not used to it. My father is not frightened of anything. I knew my father had nothing to do with it, Gaito. Your father is a liar as well as a coward. We must always be nice to our guests, Kaijon reminded his son gently, smiling to himself. Both boys were at that age in which their fathers could do no wrong in their eyes. Seeing that all of them had faces flushed from the cold, he then instructed them to gather around the fire to warm themselves, before going out again and moving the chair closer to the fire for Luana, for which she smiled kindly at him. Some part of him still felt guilty about marrying her. He was more than twice her age, and in fact, she had not even been born when the Battle of the Starfire made him King of Xiren and Overlord of the Baion Plains, as his official titles ran. Still, they had come to love each other despite their marriage beginning as the sealing of the alliance his mother had forged between him and the three cities of Karos, one of the last acts of her life. As the children chattered to themselves around the fire, he gently rubbed her back, knowing that between the cold and her pregnancy that it must be hurting her. And as he did so, he tried not to think of his second wife, Shiasa, who had died in childbirth, and the fact that the healers had told him that the first child was always the hardest. Lost in his thought, Kaya had to ask him the same question 3 times before he truly heard her. Why is it colder? Before he could answer, Gaito answered the question himself. My father told me that Lord Kaijon murdered the sun's spirit, and our world goes colder as it slowly dies. Kaijon shook his head, knowing full well that were a great many who still believed that, despite his best efforts. That isn't exactly what happened, Gaito. Is that what you're writing about all the time, father? Asked Kyuan. Yes and no, replied Kaijon, and realizing that none of the children understood what he meant, he added, I am writing a history of our family and of my attempt to form all the cities that lie between these Vernai mountains and the Sea of Dransk into one nation. Mixed up with the history of our family is the tale of how the world changed. I played my part in what has happened that day, but I did not kill the spirit of the sun, nor is the sun dying. In fact, this, he just finished gesturing out the window, is how this world is supposed to be. Can you tell us the story, please, Daddy? Said Kaya. I want to know my... I want to know myself. As I shall be Primarch one day, I would understand this world better, finished Gaito imperiously. Kaijon smiled. Very well, I suppose you're all old enough to know. I will warn you, however, that this is a long story. It will take me many days to finish it. But then again, we are going to spend the next months on the road through the Karis River Valley until we reach the port city of Reos. The children all sat themselves around the fire and looked up at him expectantly, and Luana gave him an encouraging smile. Kaijon took a deep breath and said, "This is the story of myself, of my mother Nerinah, and of my grandfather Amjoh, whom I never knew. Part of it is my own experience, and much of the rest was relayed to me by my mother before she passed on, and the final pieces of the story from an altogether stranger source. I shall begin this story with my grandfather's 20th name day, the day which would change our family forever. The city of the Zyron was dying, its buildings were falling into ruin, its wells were drying up, the herds were moving on, and the sun burned red." And that is the end of the prologue. I really hope you enjoyed it. Again, it'd be amazing if you were to take a moment, leave some comments, feedback, anything like that down below, as well as all the usual like, share, subscribe. Check out my books, check out my website, check out my socials. Anything you want to follow me on, anything you want to check out would be greatly appreciated. Um, and I'm going to end here by saying my usual sign off of I do hope you all have a wonderful day. You get a chance to do or experience something creative, and I'll catch you on the next one.